of investing.
Now, here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Ryan Abraham on Twitter, Inside Troy, owner, publisher, USCFootball.com, Heisman voter, joins us on SicEm365 Radio with David Smoak, Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak, and we take you up until 6 o'clock Central. Ryan, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, appreciate your time. What is truly USC, you think, right now, and their thoughts about the shift, however big it's going to be, where they stand, and what they truly want in the end with college football and where they are?
Yeah, I think USC is in a unique position. There's just so many blue bloods out there. There's just only a few, and we saw what Texas and Oklahoma were able to do. This is more about the LeBron James as being important, not the Frank Vogels. It's about those big brands. And Texas and Oklahoma can dictate what's going on across conferences. And I think USC is in a very similar spot. If you're talking about anything that has to do with the Pac-12, it has to start with USC. So I think they're in a good spot now. It's sort of in a wait and see. You talk to people there. And, I think before that last round when Larry Scott came in, he was really focused on parity in the conference. And for a blue blood, that doesn't really help you, that Oregon State would get the same as USC. So I think at the minimum, when these new negotiations come around with new Commissioner George Kliavkoff, USC is going to be in a much stronger position going forward. If they stay in the Pac-12, if they go to another conference, if they think about going independent, I think it's good for USC just knowing that that brand is going to carry a lot of weight.
What do you think the Pac-12 as a majority would like to do?
I think the Pac-12, the way it's set up, it's just it's nice. It's not one of the better conferences in the country, but they like the pairings of like the Oregon schools and the Washington schools and the LA schools. It's just nice symmetry across all of these universities. They all have similar as far as like academic aspirations. There's a lot of similarities through most of the teams in the conference. But that might not be what's best long term. I think there's a lot of faith in George Kliavkoff, the new Pac-12 commissioner. We got to meet with him last week at Pac-12 Media Day, and I was really impressed with him. And he's got some big problems to fix, and they got a couple of years to do it when the media rights deal ends in 2024. But I think the Pac-12 would like to stay together, if at all possible. I don't know about having other programs join or getting bigger. I think you have to kind of wait and see how that's going to work out. But a school like USC could disrupt all of that if they decide, hey, we're going to look elsewhere. Then it could be like the Oregons or the UCLAs or the Washingtons scrambling to be part of that new deal, because you don't want to be left the last program in the conference to turn the lights off. And I think everyone knows it's going to start with USC. So it's sort of going to be like, hey, what's USC going to do? And then we'll kind of figure out where we go from there.
Does USC being the brand, and I understand other schools have made a run at that, but USC, we understand the history, the tradition, the national titles and Heisman Trophy winners, NFL players, etc. Do they throw their weight around like you hear other teams that are anchors in other conferences?
100% they have not. And I think it starts from poor leadership from the very top. Their last three athletic directors were all former football players. And the last two, Pat Hayden and Lynn Swan, had no athletic director experience or administration experience whatsoever. And both were just disasters for USC. They brought in Mike Bone from Cincinnati. I think he's an actual athletic director. He knows what's going on. I think he's got a good crew. And they are going to realize I think they realize more the weight that they could have and they could throw around. They just have it. I think that first round when Larry Scott was preaching parity, Pat Hayden at the time was on board with it, even though that wasn't going to really help the program that he was running. So I feel like now they're starting to see what they can do. And I think Mike Bone is going to try to get, what's best for the conference while he's in the conference, but also what's best for USC. I'm guessing there's not going to be an equal share, because, similar with Texas and Oklahoma, basically bringing half of the TV revenue for the Big 12, I think USC is in a similar spot. Just that game against Notre Dame every year is huge for the conference. It's just they're going to bring in a lot more eyeballs than an Oregon State or a Colorado. So I feel like they haven't thrown their weight around before, but looking forward, I feel like they're going to do that more now.
Ryan, what are your thoughts on the reports that the Pac-12 and Big Ten have at least spoken about some possibilities? I know there was the main rumor initially that the Big Ten could poach those power schools, as you mentioned. And then that turned into, well, they're talking about a scheduling alliance. We heard yesterday Pac-12's talking with the Big 12. Just what are your thoughts on the idea of, rather than expansion, scheduling alliances with other conferences becoming a thing in the future?
Yeah, I think if you're George Kliavkoff, you have to keep your phone on and do them. He's getting a lot of calls from programs, from commissioners, meeting with Bob Bowlsley yesterday. There's a lot of interesting stuff out there. He's going on a listening tour trying to figure out what the problems are and where things can be fixed. And if he can get some kind of schedule alliance with the Big 12 or doing something, they already have a strong relationship with the Big 10. And if he can, especially with the Big 10, there's a lot of schools in the Big 12, I think, that would like to join the Pac-12. But with the Big 10, if he can keep, Kevin Warren happy, then he's a new commissioner there as well, and prevent something from happening like what happened to the Big 12 if the Big 10 went in and stole some of the better programs of the Pac-12 and put a couple of torpedoes in its side. So I think it behooves him to have a good relationship with the Big 10, just doing whatever he can that they wouldn't get poached that we saw before, because it's going to be a death blow to the conference if you lost like a USC or Oregon or Washington or something like that. It would be really tough. They could still survive, but just would not be at that Power 5 status. So I think he's keeping all of his options open. And, talking to the Big 12, you could work something out there. But with the Big 10, I think it's really just sort of like trying to keep them at bay and not to have them come in and poach any teams away.
I know USC had, because of the way you mentioned about 3 bad athletic directors in a row, had some financial woes. Have they kind of straightened that out?
I think they're fixing a lot of the problems that they've had. And, certainly when Mike Bohn took over, there were a lot of issues going on. He had a head coach that nobody liked, but he was, Lynn Swan, the previous athletic director, signed him to a fully guaranteed 5-year extension. And, months before he went 5-7, everyone wanted him fired. So that was a horrible move by Swan. There was a lot of problems, I think, that Mike Bohn inherited. And you had the whole varsity blues thing going down. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. And I think they were on the right track. They hit a bunch of singles. They fixed some low-hanging fruit. When you have bad leadership prior, like usually there's going to be a lot of easy fix problems. The pandemic, I don't think, made things any easier. So I think in this case, it's something like, what do you want to see Mike Bohn do? It starts with the head coach of the football team. And, will he make a move this year? I think that's you have to wait and see. But I think for the other stuff, he's been pretty good about.
Does USC draw well television eyeballs in Los Angeles?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? Get cut out there.
Does USC football carry the market in L.A.? I know it's a pro town, but USC has this massive history and tradition. Do they have eyeballs? A lot of the ratings good when it comes to the market of L.A.?
Yeah, their ratings are good. It's definitely a pro town, too. I had Bill Plaschke, a legendary LA Times columnist, on the show, and he puts their brand up there. The Lakers and the Dodgers are always there. But as far as like the football team, even with the Rams and the Chargers here, it's still USC. And they have not been good, the last decade or so. But it still carries a lot of weight in Los Angeles. So the problem is there's a lot of people in LA, but a lot of eyeballs. And there's a lot of different sports you can look at. But USC is certainly one of those big ones.
Is there optimism around the program more that they might be able now with Keaton Slovis, who played really well, in the limited games that they played last year, and kind of an upward trajectory there?
Yeah, I think there's some optimism just because they've made some upgrades on the coaching staff. There's still, if you just ask the average USC fan, the first thing they're going to tell you is, why is Clay Helton still the head coach? That's still he's still very unpopular here in Los Angeles among the USC fan base. But this new athletic department did do a lot. They improved a lot of the situations around Clay Helton. The whole coaching staff was upgraded. They're better recruiters. They're better coaches. There's better support staff. So everything around Clay Helton was upgraded and is better. But there's still, the people saying, like, even though the talent is there, even though they've got better staff, it's still a Clay Helton coach team. And it's hard for them to pick. They should go 10-2 or 11-1. But are they going to lose 3 or 4 games and that they shouldn't have? That's been the case most of the time with Clay Helton. But I think there's some optimism just coming out of the pandemic, being able to go to the Coliseum and go see the team. But for the most part, there's still some apprehension just because of the head coaches.
The NIL, Ryan, you think that with USC and some of the connections and obviously a massive city, has that been something they've been able to take advantage of?
We haven't seen a ton of that. Now, Keaton Slovis did sign with Clutch Sports, who's LeBron James, the agency he's with, and they talked about that a little bit at Pac-12 Media Day. They do have a lot of people working on those kind of deals, and there's a lot of education behind the scenes. But we haven't seen a lot of real big deals come out. It seems like people are sort of taking their time, and they're not all of them getting announced. I think once we hit fall camp on Friday, we'll be able to talk to some of the players and see what kind of deals they've been going with. But there's a lot of optimism that you have, the entertainment industry with Hollywood and all that stuff right here in town. It's going to be beneficial for NIL. But I think they're still kind of feeling it out in that first month or so of all these deals getting done.
Ryan, I know this kind of hinges on, all of the different moving pieces, but it is safe to say that the Pac-12 doesn't love their media deal and, the future streaming and all of the different possibilities that could come into play. What are the kind of thoughts now here about 3 years out from that expiring on their media deal and what that might look like in the future?
Yeah, I talked to George Kliavkoff about it a little bit when we got a chance to meet with him. And, there's a lot that's going to happen, I think, in the next 3 years. I think he likes the Pac-12 network. He likes the content they have, but the distribution is terrible. So I think that's something that needs to be fixed. They'll probably go back down to a single network and then work out a deal with DirecTV and all the different outlets and the streaming services. I mean, you can't even get them on like YouTube TV. So they got to fix Pac-12 network distribution, but also those tier one rights. It'll be curious to see, if CBS is going to be a player in this. If Fox has to fight back and maybe they become the sole partner with the Pac-12 with the ESPN basically running the South right now. If Fox could maybe do a Big Ten and Pac-12 deal, something like that could be interesting, or streaming service. But it seems like the streaming services really want, they would want those like 7 games a year that are big, not necessarily water polo matches and things like that. So it'll be curious to see how that all ends up playing out. But I feel like he's going to be able to make some big deals. And then what do they do for it? Maybe something like the Big 12 where the tier 3 rights are owned by the school and not by the conference. He's got a lot of options there, but we're not going to see a bunch of big fixes until this happens in 2024.
Last thing, and you know this, Ryan, Graham Harrell, offensive coordinator, who was coveted by a lot of different people, even parts of the NFL. Texas guy, had a great career at Ennis High School. Of course, Texas Tech, great. How much of an influence has he had?
It's been big. I think just having a more modern college football offense around it. It's not super popular with a lot of the fans. There's still a lot of student body left, student body right people, and we get questions every week about when they're going to use a fullback, and it's been hard for some of the fans to kind of get used to it. You've seen that throughout Texas high school football, and obviously Graham Harrell had a great career at Texas Tech and all that. But I feel like when you look at the numbers, just having a Keaton Slovis his freshman year put those kind of numbers up, it's working, and they got to work on the offensive line. They didn't have a spread offensive line coach for the last 2 years. Now they bring in Clay McGuire, who's got some experience in that system, and they're hoping that all is going to come together because they just got to keep Slovis upright and healthy. But when he's been healthy, he's been able to find guys open and just throw for a ton of yards. So I think there's some optimism there. Just the simplicity of Graham Harrell's scheme. The players seem to love it. Fans are kind of they score a bunch of points. I think the fans will warm up to it. But so far there's still a lot of them that want to see O.J. Simpson running off tackle,
or Reggie Bush, or whoever it might be. Yeah. You're not allowed to mention him around Southern Cal or USC. Hey, by the way, I said this the other day. I said Southern Cal and USC. A couple of USC fans say don't say that. Is that right? It's USC, or is Southern Cal? It's all. I've always responded. I've always said that. Is that wrong?
I think the athletic department says that sometimes, like, "Hey, we're not Southern Cal." I don't get it. A lot of the fans love it. I mean, just Southern Cal is the thing. Yeah. They still put out T-shirts that say Southern Cal on them too. So I don't know.
All right,
I think it's cool, but other people don't like it.
All right, it's Southern Cal to me, and people can get mad and angry. Thanks, Ryan. Great stuff. Inside Troy covers USC Trojans football like a book. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd call him Southern Cal. I'm not going to stop.
yeah,
I mean,
just- I
I think
guess
it's cool.
maybe-
I mean, what's the name of the university? Like,
remember when I called Central Florida one time? And I mean, the fan base lost their minds.
If I drove up to the front of either UCF or USC and I walked through the gates, drove through the gates, or walked through the gates of the university, what does the sign say?
University of Central Florida. Yeah. University of Southern California.
The state of Florida loves its initials. It's FAU, FIU, USF, UCF, FSU. The list goes on and on. But, yeah, I mean, very interesting stuff there. USC's obviously in a driver's seat position. And I think the Pac-12, as much of a joke as it has been or was under Larry Scott's leadership, they're in a good place now. Kleofkoff seems like a guy who's got his finger on the pulse, obviously has experience in media, which that couldn't have come at a better time in terms of what they're about to deal with these TV networks and a rights deal that expires in 2024, so not that far away now at this point. I mean, shoot, it's going to be 2022 in a blink of an eye, so we're not far at all away from that, and those things do take time to sort out. But, yeah, really interesting to get their perspective, and the Pac-12 just seems like it's going to kind of listen, and until they really feel the need to, they're not going to just jump out and make a move just for the sake of jumping out and make a move. And that's what a lot of the feedback was last week, and that's what a lot of people thought was just like, oh, once a couple dominoes fall, then the whole thing, like, there's going to be teams declaring they're going here and there, and that has not been the case. It's still just Oklahoma and Texas at this point.
All right, when we